Welcome to Fright Night.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to the blockbuster new release wall in our memory, we grab a copy off the shelf, we pop it in our VCR, and we see what time has done to it. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
You gotta have faith.
Certainly do. And together we're here to help you navigate all the landmines littered down memory lane. So here we are, Mike. We're the last show of season 4.
Yeah, or as they chap saying across the pond, series 4.
No pomp, no circumstance.
Nope. This is just it ends with a not a blockbuster, but
Yeah,
pretty good horror flick.
yeah. This is surprisingly pleasant to watch after all these years.
Yeah.
Again, Halloween's just around the corner, Mike, and I just never really captured the spirit. Even the 2 weeks since we last discussed this topic, just nothing's really come along to get me feeling more spooky. I don't know, just a different frame of reference. I think this whole country's scared about other things that are more realistic right now. So
yeah, there's more spooky stuff in November than October.
Yeah, it's a little distracting. Let's be honest. But movies are supposed to take you out of that, so maybe this one will do it for us, Mike.
That's right.
So we're going to talk about one of our favorite 80s horror Halloween classics, Mike. We're going to talk about Fright Night.
Yes, more vampires.
More vampires. We're going to go out on a bang. This was from 1985. So let's just kind of jump into it, Mike, because this was a big staple of my high school years. I don't know about you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so this was written and directed by a guy named Tom Holland. We know him from Psycho
Spider-Man.
2. Yeah,
Oh.
not that Tom Holland, Mike,
Okay.
the talented one. This is, you know, from Psycho 2. He did the movie Thinner. He wrote and adapted that from Stephen King's novel.
Oh, wow.
It's soon to be remade, I think, which is, I don't know how I feel about that either. Child's Play. Our buddy Chucky was his creation.
Okay.
And he also adapted, speaking of Stephen King, he did the TV miniseries Langoliers.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, so not bad. So
Yeah.
this had a budget of $9 million and was released on August 2nd, 1985.
Wow.
So anybody that was alive in 1985 and their parents had a HBO subscription, you have seen this movie. Ad nauseum. This was a staple for every teenager sleepover, all-nighter. Everybody watched this movie. This is a very well received. Everybody knew about this film in high school. And this is an R movie, Mike, but it's kind of a safe R, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. There's a little.
There's a little gratuitous nudity every here and
Of
now
course,
and then.
it's an 80s movie. Had to have that,
But it's one of those movies where our parents kind of let it slide because it wasn't that bad. It was passable. Especially other movies during that era. By
Yeah.
comparison, it was a little more.
If you're going to watch this or Porky's, hey.
Yeah. Yeah, mom and dad might turn the TV off for that, but they're more likely to let you watch this on the in the living room and in front of your sleeping bags on a Saturday night. So, consuming mass quantities of bagel bites, Mike. Remember when bagel bites were good?
Oh, yeah, they still are. If you
Are they? I thought we should do an entire show about food we used to eat that they have changed their recipe to make them cheaper. They just don't taste the same. But we got to talk about this movie instead. So, Mike, one of the things that really make this story come to life is the players, the cast. So why don't you walk us through the main actors here?
Alrighty. It's not a lot, when you think of this movie, you think of course, the main guy playing the vampire, Chris Sarandon, who former Mr. Susan Sarandon at one point.
Yeah, she kept his surname.
I know, right? It's pretty cool. Yeah. We saw him before in The Princess Bride. He's was kind of a pompous, was he a king or a prince? I can't remember. He was evil, so there you go. I get him confused with Michael Nouri, if you know who that is. Those two guys seem to, for me, kind of go hand in hand for 80s, 90s actors. He plays Dandridge. Was it Jerry? I think his first name. Yeah. But yeah, there you go. So he's the bad guy. You have two veterans from Fox TV shows. You had Amanda Bierce, who plays Amy, who it was Marcy Darcy in Married with Children years ago, and
great character.
it was always an annoying Al, and then William Ragsdale, who he was Charlie Brewster in Fright Night, and he was end up in Herman's Head, which for me was a revolutionary kind of show. He played Herman, and he had these people in his head that controlled his emotions. A little company called Disney kind of took that idea and made Inside Out and Inside Out 2 and made billions of dollars from that.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah. Roddy McDowall is in this movie. Cornelius from Planet of the Apes, and also
go there.
He's still transporting a specimen in laser blast while climbing out of a upside down cruise ship. And he's Peter Vincent in this movie, which I think was really cool. They gave him the name of two stars from Hammer movies like Peter Cushing and Vincent Price. And,
yeah, it's great. I had no idea about that at the time, but yeah,
it was really clever. And he plays. It's kind of funny because he's playing kind of a has-been actor where, probably in 1985, he hadn't been in a lot of stuff other than, he was a child actor back, long ago. Like I said, he had the success with Planet of the Apes series. And here he is, showing up in Fright Night. And it kind of, revitalized his career. Had the graying wig and everything looked a little... It's weird, because he seemed old. I don't know why he had to look so much older than he really was, because he, was pretty old at the time.
Yeah,
whatever. That was their call. Everybody else in the movie, the guy who played his name's also Ed, was great. I forgot how good that guy was, and being just a creepy psycho, but apparently a friend of Charlie in the movie. Great little character, but that's pretty much the cast.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So just some other notes on that cast and the subsequent filming of the movie. So Charlie Sheen auditioned for this role, but William Ragsdale got it. William Ragsdale probably hates Matthew Broderick because he was beaten out of several roles by Matthew Broderick, Biloxi Blues and Project X among them. They actually wanted Vincent Price to play Peter Vincent, but he had concern about his age and his stamina, so he decided not to. But he did come back a few years later and do Edward Scissorhands, right? Was he?
Yeah, that's right.
Mostly a cameo there.
Yeah.
Roddy McDowall was originally supposed to be Mr. Carlson on WKRP, Mike. The role,
no way.
Made famous by Gordon Jump.
Who was George Costanza's boss in Seinfeld.
That's right.
It all comes full circle.
Yeah. And God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly, Mike. Something weird about that guy, Stephen Jeffries, the guy who played Evil Ed. He was in a really good movie called Heaven Help Us with Kevin Dillon. And, he played kind of a self-flagellating kid from the Bronx in Catholic school. But that's a really good movie. He was great in that. He went on to do like adult films, Mike.
Okay.
In some capacity, I didn't want to do too much research. So I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
But yeah, he's still out doing the convention circuit. He kind of looks the same. He looks exactly like you expected.
It was Fright Night. It's the only thing I can remember from was for Fright Night. But okay.
But as we'll kind of determine in the course of discussing this movie, this strikes a seminal nerve in a lot of people. This is a lot of people's one of their favorite vampire movies of all time, and we'll kind of get to how that got to be. So this came out in 1985, which was a good time for it. It came out on the same weekend as Weird Science. That was
wow.
Prior to that, in the theaters, you had Back to the Future just juggernauting its way through the summer. I think it was released about a month ago, but it was still the number one movie for about 9 weeks, as we discussed on that episode, which we did a few weeks back. Encourage you to go check our back catalog and listen to that one. It's one of our best rated podcasts, Mike.
Oh, wow.
Who knew? The weekend after this came out, the movie Real Genius came out along with Teen Wolf.
What's the difference between Weird Science and Real Genius? I can't remember. I can't remember those two movies very well. They always seem to go together. My remembering mine, at least. They're both about creating something.
But Real Genius is more kind of more bound in reality. Okay. It was like Val Kilmer was a physicist developing a laser for Jerry Dandridge. Okay. And then Weird Science is just more of a stream of consciousness teen sex comedy where they they made Kelly LeBrock on a computer in their.
That was weird.
Yeah.
So Real Genius was actually like had some drama to it as opposed to Weird Science just being kind of a DNA kind of movie. Okay.
There were actually themes of like, morality and doing the right things with science and applying it to military tech and but yeah, that was a great movie.
We'll have to do one of those eventually.
Yes, apparently, everything on that list we should probably cover at some point.
Yeah.
Get to work now. The top movies that year were Back to the Future, of course, Beverly Hills Cop, Rambo, Rocky IV, and Cocoon, starring Wilford Brimley. Wilford Brimley was younger than us when he made that movie, Cocoon.
Holy crap.
He's been old since
I know. It's like the Abe Vigoda thing.
Yeah. Amadeus won Best Picture that year, starring the wild-eyed, coked-up F. Murray Abraham.
When he had his shirt buttoned down to his navel with his gold medallion.
We're referencing his goofing on him as Scarface Guys, which is another podcast we covered with this guy not too long ago that we're still recovering from a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
Amadeus won 8 Oscars that year out of the 11 nominations it had. 1985 on the music scene, of course, Mike, we always love to talk about 80s music. On the AP Top 40, you had Shout by Tears for Fears, People Are People by Depeche Mode, Fast Fashion, like that's what that stands for. Mystery Lady by Billy Ocean. I only mentioned that because Billy Ocean should only be singing Get Out of My Dreams and Into My Car.
Yeah.
If you're going to be Billy Ocean, you're going to be singing, why not say that song? You Spin Me Round by Dead or Alive. Right round, baby.
Right.
Or like a hurricane. Right? Pete Burns we lost a couple years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The number 5 song on the charts was Invincible by Pat Benatar. And I only mention that because it's association with the movie The Legend of Billie Jean.
Yes.
The second best ever movie based on a simple concept of a bike being stolen. First one, of course, is Teenage Strangler from 1964. And I didn't steal no bike neither. Other things going on in pop culture. The Enoch Rap Library in Baltimore, Maryland had a little rap contest that year. And a little boy named Tupac won, projecting him into superstardom there, Mike.
Yeah.
This is the year that on Sesame Street, Mr. Snuffleupagus was finally revealed. He was not a figment of Big Bird's imagination. Producers were pretty clever about this. Their motivation in doing this was so kids would be more confident about having adults trust them when they told a story of maybe potential sexual abuse. So they thought it was a way just to not have those kind of secrets like that. So
if I watched all the back catalog of Sesame Street, is it like The Sixth Sense where they were able to cleverly hide Snuffleupagus from everybody else?
I see dead Snuffleupaguses.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you actually see them or not?
This was the year they found the Titanic. I don't know if they found that relatively slutty woman's blue diamond there next to it, but whatever. They stopped using uranium in dental porcelains this year, Mike. Prior to that, they were using uranium in dental false teeth because they gave a kind of natural luster to it. So
yes,
that would explain some of my grandparents' odd behavior back in the 70s. And nuclear teeth. Super Mario Brothers was released, of course, Mike. But of course, the biggest news out of 85 was the premiere of WrestleMania 1, Mike.
Oh, wow.
That was capped off by the main event of Mr. T and Hulk Hogan.
That's right.
Facing off against Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff, Mike.
Oh, man.
So here's your coin flip, Mike. Paul Orndorff, wrestler, alive or dead?
Oh, jeez. He's got to be dead.
He's dead, yeah. But he made it to about 74 years old. So
that's okay. Yeah. So older than the average veteran wrestler.
This was highlighted by several accessories to the event, including Cyndi Lauper and Captain Lou Albano, establishing the rock and wrestling connection, which we all love so much. This had Mean Gene Okerlund singing the national anthem himself. I forgot about that. Or maybe I repressed it. I don't know.
Did it have a Spanish announcer's table?
I'm sure it got busted. Someone fell through it at some point. It's the only reason they put it out there. Someone can break it. You had Liberace as the guest timekeeper.
Hello, Frisco.
Adding to the splendor, he had Muhammad Ali as the guest referee, who actually got in the ring a few times and started to scare the crap out of his management because he's supposed to stay outside. Because who knows what could have happened. But my favorite here, of course, is the guest timekeeper here was a former Yankee manager, Billy Martin, who was beyond the pale, sloshed drunk. He was in the bag the entire WrestleMania before they even started shooting, to the point where they had to cut away from interviews from him because he wasn't making any sense. So,
good for him.
All right, so speaking of not making any sense, Mike, we're going to talk about a really staple cult movie of the 80s. A lot of us kind of grew up on that movie. Again, like I said, we record as it came out when VCRs were affordable and widely used, so everybody had a VHS copy of this. They would watch it their sleepovers and their overnighters. Just a really fun movie back in the day. So let's see if it holds up to grumpy old Gen Xers now, Mike. So hit the button, why don't you? So we get this long, 2-minute long tracking shot, which is kind of cool, of this neighborhood. The camera pans into a window where we see a couple of actors in their late 20s making out, pretending to be teenagers. Over the TV, which is playing a Hammer-style horror film. This is hosted by Peter Vincent, of course, by Roddy McDowall. We're seeing our two main characters here, Charlie and Amanda. Charlie gets up after some frustrated lovemaking to look out the window, and he sees two men moving in next door, casually carrying a coffin, very inconspicuously. But what's neat here, Mike, is Jerry the vampire is holding it with one hand.
I know, right? Yeah, it's maybe he's not as heavy as Barlow's coffin.
Maybe, yeah. But so he sees that thing, and he starts. This is where they kind of implement the neatest part of this movie is this amalgamation of like Rear Window and like the Blood Who Cried Wolf. This just really adds the kind of the tension and the element of the story. Because generally Charlie sees all this stuff, and as the audience, you know he's seeing it, but he can't really portray, or no one truly believes is what's really going on. So as in the course of this, he sees a couple women, female prostitutes go over, never come out. He sees some gratuitous nudity in the window where he sees Jerry romancing them with his giant long fingers. And he establishes immediately that because of his allegiance to this horror show that he watches religiously about vampires, he says, well, that's a vampire. Of course it is, right?
Of course.
He sees a body in a bag getting dumped the next night, a la one of the Lick Boys in Salem's Lot. He freaks out. Of course, his mom doesn't believe him, and so he gets the cops to come over and essentially tries to do a citizen's arrest, and it goes bad, Mike. It doesn't work. And as going back to the house, he sees Jerry Dandridge, the vampire, inside the house, Mike.
Uh-oh.
And he asks his mom, what the hell is he doing here? And of course, she says the dreaded words, I invited him in.
Yes.
Knowing what he knows about vampire lore.
Never invite a vampire.
He's screwed here. So he goes to his friend Evil Ed, played by Stephen Jeffries here, with his spiky hair and affinity for the occult, and he asks him for advice, and he explains to him that he's got to do all the typical vampire tropes, stake him in the heart, the garlic, the holy water, the whole deal, the crucifixes, Mike. But at that point, it's too late because Jerry's in the house, and he really spends the majority of the second act just messing with Charlie. I like the fact that Charlie's wearing as a high school student, he's wearing a sports coat, like a blazer.
Yeah, I know, right? He even has the elbow patches.
He was like your English professor. But he's supposed to be a high school senior. But yeah, so it's getting pretty nasty. He actually goes over one night and tries to kill him, but he's thwarted with a pencil. A Dixon Ticonderoga number 2, Mike, is enough to stop this vampire. He stabs his hand, and then he says, I'll come back to get you the next night. And at this point, he's gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs because he doesn't know what to do. So he makes an impassioned plea. He goes to the local television studio to find the horror host, Peter Vincent. And as if that was his real job, he asks him to assist him with killing the vampire. And of course, the actor here, Roddy McDowall, it's like great, one of these. And he just dismisses him quickly.
Right.
And that kind of just puts Charlie in this spot where he's helpless. So Amy, his girlfriend, come over to check on him with Ed, and he's got his entire room filled with candles for some reason. Very romantic, Mike. But he's got the room covered in garlic, and he's sharpening a bunch of steaks. And they realize that friend is going to go kill their neighbor. So in an attempt to kind of like delay that, they go over and decide to cut a deal with Roddy McDowell just to make a plea to his, will you please humor our friend because he's a little mental. And after offering a $500 savings bond, he takes it. Roddy does, because he had just been fired, of course, so he needed the money. So he does this ruse where he fills up a little vial full of just tap water, and he tells Charlie it's holy water. And they go over to confront Jerry, and they make him drink it. And of course he does, and he downs it, and they all make amends. As they're all meeting together, Jerry Dandridge realizes that Amanda is the perfect match for his long lost love, Mike.
Okay, I was wondering. They didn't really explain it too much. Just he tells his real Renfield character that she looks just like her. It's like, okay,
just like they ripped off a couple years later in Bram Stoker's Dracula when Gary Oldman thought Winona Ryder looked just like his long lost love. Yeah, I wonder where they got that from. Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course he drinks the water and he's fine. And as they're walking out, Roddy McDowell opens up his little hand mirror and realizes that there's no reflection. And suddenly our brave vampire hunter isn't so brave, and he kind of sprints out of the house, and that really tips his hand that Charlie knows that he is, in fact, a vampire, because nothing else would scare this guy this way.
Yeah.
So the last act is, of course, them trying to figure out a way to kill this vampire. But Jerry's too smart for him, right? So the vampire goes out and finds Ed walking down a dark alley and turns him and becomes a little wolf, which is great. Tries to kill Roddy McDowell later. He follows Amy home, and there's this really cringy, 15-minute scene where they're in this.
Yeah, that dance club scene, man.
That's 80s AF, but boy, they could have cut a lot of that out. But she's kidnapped and she's taken hostage by converted. She's bitten, and all this failure and this cowardly alliance stuff is really weighing on Roddy McDowell's conscience. So he comes back to reunite with Charlie for the big finale. That doesn't go very good either. At the first sign of trouble, Roddy McDowell starts running away screaming. He runs next door to Mom's house and sees that evil Ed is there as a wolf. And he ends up having a fight with him, and where he actually stakes him and kills him, which is pretty scary for a kid.
Yeah, it was a drawn out death too. It wasn't just killed him and disappears. It was actually it took about 2 minutes for him to actually die. It was like agony, man. Yeah,
so that's the body horror element that's really helped. All practical effects, of course, because CGI wasn't really a big presence in movies then, but pretty good stuff. A lot of stop motion. We'll get that here in a minute. This is where the character Amy, played by Amanda Beers, really sluts out. Like she become a vampire, you get really slutty.
It seemed like a lot of women vampires seem to lose their bras too for some reason.
Yeah. So that's her thing now. And she's in the house, and they're the big finale is, of course, Charlie and Peter trying to kill the vampire. They take out the Renfield guy with a couple old school with a couple bullets.
I love his death because he dies in so many multiple ways. He melts. He becomes sand. He emulates. He has to be staked. He has to be, and then he finally just becomes a skeleton and falls down the stairs. It's okay.
He ran out of ways to die.
Yes.
So they end up getting Dandridge, the vampire, down in the basement, of course. This is where he turns into a bat puppet, a stop motion bat puppet, flying around with giant teeth, which I thought at the time was really cool. It looks a little dated now, of course.
Yeah, a little bit.
But there's this big confrontation, big finale battle in the basement, and rather than just board up the windows down in the basement, they painted the glass black for some reason.
Yeah.
And so this allows, of course, daylight to happen, where they start throwing rocks at the glass and exposing Jerry to the sun. And
the sun always rises very fast in these kind of movies too.
They start at 9 p.m. and for some reason 8 hours goes really quick. Of course it's daylight. The sun's rays hit our evil vampire, and he dies. And Amanda is saved, Mike, because he was the head vampire, and he gets the girl, and everybody's happy. Including the Jay Giles band, because they get to sing the horrible Fright Night song at the end.
That was awful.
Was that?
That was one of the worst songs I've ever heard. I couldn't believe it was them when I saw the music credit at the end. I was like, that was the Jay Giles band?
How could a great band sound that horrible?
Wow.
Well, but there you go. So let's get to awards and accolades, then we can talk about how we felt about this movie. So this had a $6 million opening, so not too terrible. Had a total domestic haul of $25 million on their budget. Translates by Hollywood math. That's a big hit. It was the top horror box office that year for 85, so that was pretty cool. It had a sequel in 1988, which I have not seen. For some reason, I just never had the ambition to want to watch this. Because I was just a big fan of the original and didn't want to see.
It would kind of. I haven't seen it either. I just figured it would sour the original.
Yeah, it made a haul to $3 million in 1988. It won 3 of the 6 Saturn Awards it was nominated for. MTV wasn't a thing at this point, Mike. So sorry, no Oscars or Golden Globes. Weirdly enough, but a much beloved movie. There were 5,000 Platinum Edition 30th anniversary Blu-rays that sold out in 48 hours. People, as a collector's item, really love this movie. It was horribly remade in 2011 with Colin Farrell as the main vampire. I watched a few minutes of it, Mike, and
really,
yeah, nah. It just made $18 million in 2011. 72% cinema score. That's not very good. When fans dip below 80, it's usually a bomb. So again, just something that probably didn't need to be touched. And Colin Farrell redid another movie that shouldn't be touched. The
Total Recall.
Total Recall, and it's the same
I forgot
result.
That was him. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so he made some odd choices back then. So this was a lot of fun to kind of go back in the time machine and watch this movie that we had watched so many times late at night. So Mike, why don't we kind of run it through the Grumpy Meter? The Grumpy Meter is a part of the show where we talk about the movie we just saw when we watched it as young moviegoers, and then we revisit it again as grumpy old jerks to see how our frame of reference might have changed one way or the other. So, Mike, why don't you head us off?
You hit on the head earlier when you said, it was like 80s AF. It was just the soundtrack, man. I kept thinking of Miami Vice or like, it was just, it had this, the little guitar riffs and even the saxophone music when they're walking around the city at night.
It's always a sax solo.
Yeah. And then like you said, the 10 or 15 minute long club scene, it was just like, holy crap, this movie, it did not age well for me, at least. The special effects were, what they were, but
yeah,
just, even I'm not sure if you told the budget when you were going over it earlier, but like, They had to really have a cheap budget on this movie because even the little street where they live on is a Hollywood backlot.
Yeah, this is
complete with a church. It's like 2 houses away.
Yeah, $9 million, Mike, and it was interesting because it was such a small budget. The studio kind of stayed away from it. Didn't have any contributions. Didn't monkey with it. Didn't mess with the creative team because they were busy. The studio was busy pushing the movie Perfect. That was their golden baby that they wanted to take.
Travolta.
But there you go. So
there you go. Yeah, even like the town was like you could tell was like a backlot set, that was used for all kinds of other things. Other than that, it's a good story. Roddy McDowall is the reluctant kind of vampire killer, makes the movie for me.
Yeah.
Like you say, it had the established ground rules for vampires as far as the crucifix not working unless you have faith, the sunlight, and Jerry Dandridge is a vampire. His powers are kind of, all over the place. You kind of think he's superhuman at one point. Then the next thing you know, he's stabbed with a pencil and he spins around like he's an ice skater. and whenever he sees like a crucifix from, Charlie holds it up and he makes that moaning sound.
He goes like Lou Costello.
Yeah, he goes all ham to it. But yeah, it's so it keeps it from being really a scary movie. But like I said, I kind of appreciate the humor in it, and that's what makes it for me. And if you look back on this movie, even 50 years from now, it's going to have that. It's going to hold up as a classic kind of vampire tale that even we see with like a Christopher Lee or Bela Lugosi kind of movie, I think.
Yeah.
So, it was entertaining enough to you kind of get by the silliness and the 80s stuff to still enjoy it. And maybe not as much as I did, 35, 40 years ago, but I still liked it.
Yeah, I'm pretty much word for word with you, Mike. Again, this was this was a very teenager friendly, this is a typical 80s teenager movie. plot isn't complex enough. It moves. There's no like lulls in the story for the most part. It keeps the traditional vampire lore, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
I've always struggled with the horror comedy genre, but this is probably perfect for its audience. It's probably just light enough to not be too heavy, but
Right.
enough to merit at least an inherent sense of creepiness and a good scare every now and then for,
Yeah,
the
that's a good word for it. It isn't heavy, and you don't have
yeah,
to rely on like, hey, where did this guy come from? Why is he here? Like there's no backstory. You don't need to even worry about it. He's a vampire. You find that
yeah,
out like 5 minutes in, or when these guys are carrying a coffin. Like, what's going
yeah.
on here? I mean, that's all you need to know, and
This
then
is
you have it. You have a setup right there.
this is the perfect movie to sit in a dark room with the soft glow of the TV with
Yeah.
popcorn and sleeping bags. It's one of those things it's just a perfect little event movie for your friends. And I didn't have any of that on the rewatch. I was watching it in my kitchen on my laptop in the middle of the day. So that probably put the experience out a little bit, but I still enjoyed it. I really liked seeing Roddy McDowall in here. I really liked his performance here. There's an interesting story about him I forgot to mention earlier in the show, where Roddy McDowall was a huge photography nut, and he filmed everything all the time, including a lot of stuff on the Planet of the Apes. And he could always be seen on the studio lot, with a Super 8 or 16 millimeter camera filming all the time. So apparently he got into some trouble because he had filmed so much stuff on the studio lot, and he had taken like a lot of film that had been cast away, that because of course the bulk filming that goes on in the old studio lots was all on film, and people would generally just throw that out or sleep in the storage rooms, and he would take significant amounts of like raw footage home with him on these long protracted
Oh
shoots,
wow.
to the point where he got raided by the government. They came in and raided his house, I think in 1982, and found this like warehouse size stash of
Oh man.
contraband of film that he had accumulated over his acting career in Hollywood, including
Yeah.
some very bizarre cut footage or some original prints of movies that weren't released. But he did it just out of love of film, which is just an interesting kind of thing. That
Right.
of course, he cooperated with the investigation and wasn't found in any charges, but he had archived, hundreds of thousands of titles just through that love of film. So you got to really
That's
appreciate
wild.
where he's coming from. So. But all in all, this was even though we're not really in the Halloween spirit, this is a perfect movie for your Halloween viewing. It's just hits right in the sweet spot there, and I enjoyed it a little less this time, of course, because of I just couldn't escape the dated aspect of it, Mike.
Yeah.
I couldn't push through. I
It's the
couldn't.
soundtrack. For me,
Yeah,
it wasn't even like, usually you see an 80s movie, like, oh, look at that guy. He's wearing a Panama Jack shirt,
yeah,
But it wasn't even that. It was just that music was just it dates it so much
yeah.
at least for me.
But overall, a good Halloween movie to watch.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Halloween, so we got a little carried away, probably more than we said we were going to do, even though we said we'd kind of tone it down this year. But we spent the last couple shows kind of reviewing different media outlets' lists of favorite movies for Halloween and giving them our snarky, witty, observational comments to go with each one of those lists. But we thought for the finale of our Halloween blowout this season, we just go back to our regular scheduled stuff, and straight from the horse's mouth, we talk about our favorite movies. So okay, Big Shot, if you don't like those movies, what movies do you like? And we're going to do that. So for this week's installment of You Just Made the List, pal, Mike and I are going to gleefully disregard all the other media outlets' recommendations for Halloween and just talk about the ones that we truly feel are the best ones to watch. But with a little twist, Mike, we're going to explain what our top 3 favorite horror Halloween movies are. But we're also going to include the scene, to use a wrestling term here, that put it over. The scene that stands out, the signature moment that makes that one of the most horrifying scenes that really kind of elevates this movie above the rest. So we're going to talk about those particular instances, Mike. So let's keep it to 3 because we can probably go for 25 or 50 ourselves. But we'll do an honorable mention if we got a little extra left over. But Mike, why don't you head us off? Talk about your favorite Halloween film and the scene that pushed it over.
Okay. Well, mine are kind of 3 movies that are a nod to the movie we just watched, Fright Night. They're horror movies that have like dark humor to them. So they're more kind of lean toward like
Okay.
being quirky or funny. And they weren't in any of our list. So that's the best part.
Okay.
But my first one is a movie from 1996 called From Dusk Till Dawn. And it was one of the only George Clooney movies I like. And but it's there are two criminals that are trying to get to Mexico. They end up kidnapping Harvey Keitel and Juliette Lewis and their her brother.
Big mistake.
And trying to cross into Mexico, and they're there to meet some guy to hand over some money and not get in trouble. So they meet at this bar called the Titty Twister, and that's their big mistake is because apparently it's a den for vampires. And,
What?
I know, right? But this movie had some of the most creative kills in it, as far as just different ways you could kill truckers and bikers and vampires. And but one of my favorite scenes in the movie is not a kill. It's he does get killed later, spoilers, but it's the Tarantino character who has a certain affinity to the exotic dancer Selma Hayek in the movie, and at one point he even drinks out of her shoe and drinks out of her foot and sucks her toe. It's a great scene. I'd recommend people rewatching that scene. Then there's some horror elements around that.
I think
yes,
Tarantino foot fetish. That's horrible enough for me.
There you go. So you can combine some horror and some humor and some sex and assault at the same time. Yeah. So there you go. From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996.
Well, I'm going to go take a bath, and when I come back, I'll give you my first one. So
all right.
So my first one is we've talked this about a few times, but I can't not talk about it. This is from a movie called The Witch from 2015. Horrifying movie. Mike, I know you haven't seen it yet. This was on a couple of the lists that we talked about in the last couple of weeks, but I want to tell you why it's a scary movie. So it's about this puritanical family that gets kicked out of their local community because for their religious views, and they have to go out and live in the woods next to a coven of witches. And the shenanigans ensue, of course. But why this is so scary, Mike, is here's the scene that puts it over for me. So in the beginning scene, you see Anya Taylor-Joy, beautiful, gorgeous anime, almost anime-looking face, looking right at the camera, playing peekaboo with a little baby, her youngest sister. And one of the times she plays peekaboo, she opens her eyes and the baby's gone.
Oh,
and you hear this rustling like footsteps, and you see the image of it looks like maybe a witch carrying the baby off into the woods, and then the camera goes black.
Oh boy!
And then it fades back in. You see a mortar and a pestle in a cave, and there's some goo in there, and you see this horrible, naked-looking apparition of a witch covering itself in this poultice, Mike. And from what you just seen earlier, you know what the contents of that poultice is. And when you see that scene, you're like, okay, this is something not meant to be seen by man. And it just gets really worse from there. The dread and the overhanging fear that lingers through this film, and it doesn't end well either. Believe it or not, Mike. But that scene alone, that's really just pushed it over, and within the first 10 minutes, you know that you're in for something. And I can see why a lot of people would bail out on this movie, but I stuck it out, much to my chagrin. So that's my first one from 2015, The Witch. Check it out. It's good watch, everybody.
After that, I'm like,
Yeah.
My second movie is a little movie from 1986 that, I don't know. It was, for me, this was a VHS movie that I had that I watched several times, but it's called Terror Vision. Maybe a cult classic if you want to call it a classic. It's not. It's a pretty silly movie, but it involves an alien that is kind of has the same plot as Superman 2 in a way. Like this alien is shooting out this bad alien who's called the Hungry, not Hungry Howie, but it's something like that. Where it's basically a beast that eats everything.
Yeah,
and he is sent from his home planet and gets caught up in a satellite signal that's beamed down to Earth into the satellite dish that this family just acquired, and he ends up in their house. And this is where like a lot of weird stuff. This is where it becomes like The Thing. This movie apes a lot of different movies, but it becomes The Thing where like it starts it will possess a person and then become like this weird creature, and all it will have is just maybe their head or something. It's a gross movie. It's not as gross as like Slither, but it's like that where like it becomes a body horror thing. But it's a comedy. It really is funny because it involves these kids who find out their parents are swingers and have a room in their house called the Pleasure Dome. I can't give this movie justice.
Where are you going with this, Mike?
The parents invite this other couple over, and they all get eaten by this monster. And
that's fair.
The scene in the movie that becomes really creepy is all of them are in the bed together, and all you see is their heads. But the monster's able to reanimate them, so it still sounds like their parents. And the kids walk into the room and see, their parents along with this other swinging couple that got killed. And they're like, "Oh, come join us, honey," And it's so creepy. And it has Garrett Graham in there. If you know anything about this guy, he has this weird grin on his face. He's like, "Hey, come on," Yeah. And then you know they're monsters underneath the bedspread, but all you see is their faces. And I remember seeing that scene when I first saw this movie. It's like, okay, this movie. And
you sure you're not thinking about Bob and Carol and Ted Nellis?
No, this is a horror movie.
Okay.
It eventually becomes like the end of the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where like you find out that not only is this monster has gotten loose and it kills everybody, and at the very end, it finds out it wants to go to the actual television station to be beamed everywhere, and that's like the end of the movie. Like, oh my gosh, it's such a dark ending to what is really kind of a funny movie. Even though everybody gets chomped and killed. Anyway, that's TerrorVision, 1986. Watch it.
All right, well done, Mike. Thank you. I'm never gonna watch that ever. All right, so the next one on my list is more of a recent one. Again, I'm going to go with the movie from 2007 called Paranormal Activity. There's like 17 sequels to this. I've never watched any of them, but this first one kind of took that found footage aspect that was established earlier in another one of my favorite scary movies, Blair Witch. But this was about a woman that lives in an apartment complex that's sleepwalking, and she's possessed by this demon's been following her around, and it's shot home video style. And that realism really got me. But the scene that puts it over for me is, in addition to like all the weird, just her sleepwalking, which in itself is like inherently scary just to see someone sleepwalking and all that stuff. But the time lapse stuff of that, there's a scene in here. There's a couple of scenes that do it. One is when they bring in a psychic medium to come in and try to analyze the house, and he doesn't even stay. He just gets out and he says, "You got to get out of here now." He tells her husband that he needs to leave because this thing is attached to her no matter where they go. So that she didn't even try to do a Zelda Rubinstein here. Like he just got out of town. So that was kind of scary. But
welcome.
The scene that really that put me over is, again, it's time lapse footage again, but it's got a nice little element of supernatural. So one of the things they suggested that they do was they cover the floor in talcum powder at night to see if this entity is actually there. So you see this time lapse footage of them sleeping, and you look at the floor, and at about 3 a.m. in the morning, things start to move around a little bit, and you look, and I'm getting chills just talking about it now, but you look at the floor and you see these like cloven hooves making imprints in the talcum powder while they're sleeping. And again, I didn't sleep for a couple of days after that. Just that scene was just so unnerving to me because of the realism attached to it. The movie itself is pretty good. They stretched the premise a lot with the sequels, I suppose, but this one here really unnerved me. And I haven't gone back to it since I watched it the first time because it's one of those things that just I didn't want to like bring that back up in my hard drive. So I thought would be worthy of this list. So that's Paranormal Activity from 2007.
That's good.
All right, Mike, let's go to your last one here, and maybe an honorable mention if you got one.
Honorable mention of movies we talked about before on this. Even done a couple of them, like Evil Dead 2, They Live, which we need to do, and Near Dark. That's another one that's really good.
Yep.
And John Carpenter's Vampires, which is another one of his movies. It's got a lot of levity in it, but it's about a serious subject, vampires, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, my third choice though is Swamp Thing from 1982. I got two words for you. Adrian Barbeau. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but anyway, Swamp Thing is it's about botany at its core. It's about two rival botanists. You got one guy who he's working on this formula.
There's always a formula.
Yeah, there's always a formula. Is to instantly like grow things, and he has his, of course, his laboratories in this creepy swamp. Something goes awry, and he becomes the Swamp Thing, which is basically just a giant creature made of green and plants.
Yeah.
The other botanist is kind of his rival, which is the reason why he turned into goo, because the rival botanist had something to do with him turning into the Swamp Thing. And this
Poison Ivy?
Yeah, it's like a.
They're Jason.
Oh, jeez.
Sorry, keep going.
But yeah, the rival guy is really nasty. He tries to create the same formula, and the rest of the movie is just Swamp Thing and Agent Barbeau trying to get their revenge on it. But the scene that got me was when the evil scientist is testing his formula. He's gathered everyone at a dinner party, and you find out he's used his first dose of his formula on his right hand man as assistant. And there's this. It's not very well done because it's from 1982, but just the transformation of this guy from like this man to like this half creature with pointy ears, and like just while everybody's watching this happen, and he doesn't even realize he drank this drink, and it's just like
it's repulsive. Yeah,
it is very repulsive, and it's the first thing I think about when I think of like a repulsive scene from a transformation kind of movie. It's like an island. This guy is like an Island of Dr. Moreau creature that.
Oh, just horrible manifestation. Just you're right. I remember that's very scary.
Yes, but there you go, Swamp Thing.
Wow, if you want to freak out, might go body horror. I'm seeing a pattern.
Yes, it's got me.
All right, so my last pick here is going to be pretty standard, but I got a couple honorable mentions I'd like to talk about. Of course, we can't not talk about The Shining here.
Yeah.
But particularly the room when he goes into room 237 in that emerald green tub, and of course the beautiful woman walks out, and then he looks in the reflection in the mirror, and
she's not so beautiful.
I've seen this movie 100 times. I still get a chill every time I see that bloated, waterlogged corpse in the mirror and his reaction to it, and the walking towards the camera when she's laughing, that English laugh. That's up there. I don't know if you remember the movie Pet Sematary, Mike. The character Zelda, who was like not even critical to the plot, it was kind of like a throwaway thing, but she was his wife's sister who had like spina bifida and lived in the closet, and she was all emaciated and screaming and running towards the camera. There's a running towards the camera thing that always gets me. But yeah, that was awful. We talked about room 237, the Timberline Lodge, the actual hotel that was made from. They don't have a room 237. They asked that the room 217, which was one in the original book, not be used because they were afraid people would not want to stay there after they saw the movie. So they asked them to change it to 237. But Mike, you want to guess the most popular requested room in the Timberline Lodge now is 217, of course. Isn't that great? Yeah. So, but my final list here has to go to a movie we haven't talked about yet, but I think merits a conversation at some point. I'm going to talk about Misery from 1990. And I'm going to talk about the scene that really put that one over for me in terms of horror was the hobbling scene, Mike, where James Caan plays a writer that's in a car accident and gets taken in a remote Winter Lodge Road by his number one fan, Kathy Bates. And we kind of know how that story goes, but he makes an attempt to escape during one of the nights here, and she's not very happy with it, so she catches him and drugs him. And he wakes up bound to the bed, and he realizes that he's got a 4x4 wooden plank between his ankles. And I think what really sets it off for me, Mike, is Moonlight Sonata. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata is playing in the background.
I forgot about that, yeah.
And she's got a sledgehammer, of course, and she's being very empathetic to him, saying, "We have to take care of this, Paul, because I don't want you to run away." But what makes it more horrifying, Mike? There's a section of this scene where you think he's going to get out of it because he's being very down to earth and very practical with her, and you think she's starting to get it. You think this isn't going to happen, but the movie goes there, right? And she decides that, and of course the camera follows the hammer to the point of impact, and then the point of his like ankle being, knocked loose to that direction. That scene, I remember the audience just cringing, just audible gasp, and people just, didn't even know how to react to that. Of course, then the camera cuts to black after that. But that scene, it's one of the reasons I don't go back to that movie a lot, because of that scene. Just one of those things where, again, the realism, the inherent realism of that is a potential thing where a fan, given our, especially now, the age of celebrity, where a fan could misconstrue that kind of thing and that fake love thing, and that could completely happen. So, yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. It's like that movie of James Coburn and Nick Nolte. It's a really good movie. I wish I remember the name of it. It has something to do. It have a scene where Nick Nolte has like a tooth problem. He has to pull out his own tooth, and the movie's really good, but I can't watch it because of that one scene. It's
just the one scene puts you off, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's like.
Was that Affliction?
Affliction. That's it. Yeah, that's great. It's a great movie, but I know in my mind I can't go back. Yeah, sorry.
All right, well, speaking of not going back, this is the last show of our season, guys. So we didn't make a big deal of our season finale, but we want to thank everybody for their continued support. We had 40% increase in downloads for season 4 over season 3. We just keep growing, and we just had a lot of fun this season. We had a great mix of 26 films we did this year. We really had a lot of fun. And your feedback and your support have been just very humbling. So we want to thank you guys for another great season. We're not going to take any time off. We're going to go right into season 5 here, which should debut season 5. First show should debut somewhere around Sunday, November 10th, right on our regular schedule. So after this movie comes out, we're going to re-release on Saturday. Following Saturday, we're going to re-release Nightmare on Elm Street from last year's VHS Big Box Season Bonanza, featuring Headbang and Mosh Pit, where we talked about Nightmare on Elm Street. That was a lot of fun. So that'll be out after this one, so make sure you check that as well. You can check out more about me and Mike on our Instagram page at Grumpy Nostalgia. You can send us an email at nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com. You can check us out on YouTube. No one does, but it's going to be a running joke. But they're
there. They're there for the consumption.
They're there for your consumption, of course. You can check us out there. Please do. We'd like to get that channel a little bit of growth this year, but that's going to have to include making some more videos. So we're going to have to see how that's going to work. But all in all, we just had a fantastic season, Mike, and thanks to you again, buddy. It was a lot of fun. We're actually kind of learning how to do this now. Which is cool. So we don't have any big plans for season 5, other than just some upcoming collaborations with some of our interweb friends, and we're hoping to get some of those things to come into place. So we're looking forward to getting that for you next year. But again, we can't thank you enough for the support you gave us this year. That type of growth is just something we never anticipated, and thank you all for that. So, Mike, that's going to kind of wrap it up. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here today?
Just go to the light. All are welcome.
You're so cool, Brewster. All right, so for Mike James, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time. Happy Halloween, everybody.